Hey class, so today we're going to learn about cell respiration. Cell respiration. Our key concept is that all cells need chemical energy, and the essential question is how is energy made in the body? So notice this is our equation for cellular respiration. So we have oxygen plus sugar. When that's combined, we make or we produce carbon dioxide, water, and energy. Before you guys start the notes or you complete the lecture, please go ahead and watch this video on cell respiration. I feel that when you guys watch this video, it will help you out before. So this way you guys are kind of familiar with some of the terminology that's going to be used. All right, when we talk about cell respiration, we got to talk about ATP. ATP. Don't forget ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate. Adenosine triphosphate. And it's the chemical compound that is used to store energy in all living cells. ATP is used as a power source for chemical reactions. It helps to build molecules, and it supplies energy for our body's activities. It equals the energy that our cells can use. So our body recognizes ATP. That is our energy source. The structure of ATP is composed of an adenine base, which is a nitrogen-derived base, ribose, which is a 5-carbon sugar, and 3 phosphates. Please make sure to know this structure. I know that you guys have been taught this already, but once again, review it and make sure that you guys know the structure of ATP. How do we get energy from ATP? Well, energy is released by breaking the high energy bond between the last 2 phosphates in ATP, as we see here. So anytime a bond is broken, energy gets released. When the 3rd phosphate group is lost, a slightly different molecule forms known as ADP, adenosine diphosphate. And as we recall, phosphate gets added back on to form ATP. And our body does this all day long. So what's the purpose of cellular respiration? The food you eat cannot be used by cells directly. It needs to be converted into a different form, basically a form that your body recognizes. So cells can only use energy in the form of ATP, or adenosine triphosphate. Cellular respiration is a series of processes in which the energy found in carbohydrates, or the food that we eat, such as glucose, is transformed into ATP, And if we look at this video, or I'm sorry, this illustration here, we see how this student here is intaking oxygen. Oxygen then is used by the cell to help form ATP. Humans inhale oxygen because it is needed to make energy through cellular respiration. Humans exhale carbon dioxide because it is waste from cellular respiration. So we inhale oxygen and we exhale carbon dioxide. However, in photosynthesis, it's the opposite, right? So in photosynthesis, plants take in carbon dioxide and give off oxygen. So these two cycles are dependent upon each other. They're dependent upon each other. But today we're going to only focus on cell respiration. Cellular respiration makes ATP by breaking down sugars. Cellular respiration is aerobic, or it requires oxygen. Aerobic stages take place in the mitochondria. So cellular respiration occurs in the mitochondria of all types of cells, plants, animals, and bacterial cells. This is where most of the ATP is produced. Mitochondria has an outer membrane and a folded inner membrane. So this here's our structure of our mitochondria. It has an outer membrane and it has an inner membrane. The folds themselves are called the cristae. And the fluid-filled space inside of the folds are called the matrix. So these are the structures of the mitochondria, which you're required to know. We have the inner membrane, the outer membrane, the cristae, and the matrix. Cellular respiration occurs in 3 steps. The first step is called glycolysis. Now, note, glycolysis is respiration without oxygen. So oxygen is not needed to make ATP in this stage. Oxygen is not needed. And it occurs in the cytoplasm. It occurs in the cytoplasm of the cell. The second step is the Krebs cycle, which is also known as the citric acid cycle. And then the last step is the electron transport chain. Electron transport chain. All right, let's look at glycolysis first. If I just look at the term glycolysis, glycolysis means breaking down glucose. So glycal means sugar and lyse means to split. So this term glycolysis literally means splitting of sugar. During glycolysis, sugar is split into 2 molecules called pyruvate. Pyruvate, you gotta know that. So one thing that is important about glycolysis is we split glucose, which is a 6-carbon sugar, into 2 3-carbon molecules called pyruvate. Now, it's an ancient pathway which harvests our energy, where energy transfer first evolved. The transfer of the energy from organic molecules to make ATP. And it's still the starting point for all cellular respiration, meaning that all organisms do glycolysis. All organisms perform glycolysis. The only thing with glycolysis is that it's inefficient. So it only makes 2 ATP molecules for every 1 glucose. And it occurs in the cytosol, which is also known as the cytoplasm. Now, that's not enough ATP, as we see for specific players, such as an athletic player like the soccer player we see here. So glycolysis, like we said, is the very first step. It splits sugar into 2 pyruvate molecules, and it occurs in the cytosol, or the cytoplasm. Now, there is an evolutionary perspective when we talk about glycolysis. So, in terms of prokaryotes, such as bacteria, they are the first cells that had no organelles. So, bacteria have no organelles. However, they still need to make energy for themselves as well. So, during that time of Earth's development, there was no oxygen in the atmosphere. It was an anaerobic atmosphere. So life on Earth first evolved without free oxygen in the atmosphere. Energy had to be captured from organic molecules in the absence of oxygen. Prokaryotes, such as bacteria, that evolved glycolysis are ancestors of all modern life. So all cells still utilize glycolysis. All cells still utilize glycolysis. Once again, because glycolysis occurs without oxygen, and it occurs in the cytoplasm. The enzymes of glycolysis are very well conserved. So the enzymes are very well conserved over time. All right, so stage 1 of glycolysis, as we said, we cut the 6-carbon glucose molecule into 2 3-carbon molecules called pyruvate. Once again, you got to know what the term pyruvate is. So that is the 2 3-carbon molecules made at the end of glycolysis. It occurs in the cytoplasm. It occurs in the cytoplasm of the cell, not in the mitochondria. It's an anaerobic process, meaning that there is no oxygen required. There's no oxygen required. Carbon dioxide is released. It only generates 2 molecules of ATP. It only generates 2 molecules of ATP. And it produces a molecule, or actually, 2 molecules of NADH. NADH is an electron carrier. Basically, what it does is it strips off hydrogen, meaning it takes the hydrogen from glucose in the cytoplasm and it carries it to the mitochondria. NAD, or NADH, you guys, is like Uber or like Lyft, okay? What it does is it picks up a hydrogen and it drops it off to the mitochondria. Once it drops it off, then it goes back to the cytoplasm and it picks up another hydrogen again from glycolysis, and then it drops it back off to the mitochondria. So as we could see If there's anything, please remember that in glycolysis, our sugars are split into 2,3-carbon molecules called pyruvates. So once again, glycolysis is needed for cellular respiration. The products of glycolysis enter cell respiration when oxygen is available. Okay, so once again, when there's oxygen, then these molecules will continue on to cell respiration. Okay, 2 ATP molecules are used to split glucose at the start of glycolysis. 4 ATP molecules are produced. 2 molecules of NADH are produced, and 2 molecules of pyruvate. So just like we stated, what you need to know, 2 molecules are pyruvate, 2 molecules of NADH. We make 4, we use 2, so that means that we only make a total of 2 ATP. 2 ATP, okay? 2 ATP. All right, here's a brief video on glycolysis just to kind of give you a computer imagery of what's going on, or some computer diagrams. So go ahead and watch this video. It's pretty short. It kind of gives you a better visual. Okay.
Cells derive energy from...
All right, the next step after glycolysis is called the Krebs cycle. The Krebs cycle is the first main part of cell respiration. Pyruvate that we made in glycolysis is broken down before the Krebs cycle. So as we see here, pyruvate from glycolysis is broken down. In the process of pyruvate being broken down, carbon dioxide is released, another NADH is produced, and coenzyme A bonds to 2 carbon molecules. Now, I know that this is going to seem a little tricky, but what I need for you guys to understand is that cell respirations is a series of chemical reactions, all to make ATP, okay? All right, stage 2 in the Krebs cycle. It occurs in the matrix of the mitochondria. So remember we talked about that, the matrix. The matrix is the fluid-filled space. It's an aerobic process, meaning that oxygen is required. Oxygen is required in order for the Krebs cycle to continue. Carbon dioxide is released, and the bulk amounts of NADH and FADH are produced. So FADH is a new molecule, like we said. FADH is a cousin of NADH. So this here would be like Uber. And then the sister company to Uber would be Lyft. Okay, both do the same thing. Okay, so both molecules are going to carry hydrogen. They're going to carry hydrogen. Okay, they're going to carry hydrogen. And a total of 2 ATP molecules are produced. A total of 2 ATP molecules are produced during the Krebs cycle. So if there's anything that you need to remember, this here is what you need to recognize in the Krebs cycle. Oxygen is required, carbon dioxide is released, NADH and FADH are made, and 2 molecules of ATP. As we said, the Krebs cycle produces the energy-carrying molecule NADH. So as we said, this is a series of chemical reactions. So citric acid is broken down and NADH is made, as we see here. Citric acid is made. Another NADH comes in and strips off a hydrogen. Another NADH and FADH come in. All right, same thing. Now, what is the importance of the NAD and the FAD? We keep talking about them, but what exactly do they do? They are super important molecules as they are used to make the final product of ATP. So the electron transport chain is the second main part of cell respiration. The electron transport chain uses those NADH and FADH to make ATP, okay? So if there's anything you guys gotta know is that NADH and FADH is used to make ATP. The high energy electrons enter the electron transport chain. So like we said, NAD and FAD is going to come in and they're going to drop off the hydrogen. Notice here, okay? Energy is used to transport hydrogen ions across the inner membrane. The hydrogen ions flow through the channel in the membrane. Molecules here are going to go from when there's more to where there's less, from a high concentration to a low concentration, from a high concentration to a low concentration. The electron transport chain, as we said, uses NAD and FADH to make ATP. The breakdown of one glucose molecule produces up to 38 molecules of ATP. Another thing you need to know within the membrane is called this enzyme, ATP synthase. And what ATP synthase does is it is an enzyme, and I know that's an enzyme because it ends in ASE, and it makes ATP. It produces ATP. Oxygen picks up electrons and hydrogen, and then water is released. So if we look at this ATP synthase molecule, remember, like I said, the hydrogens are dropped off from NAD and FAD. They make what's known as a concentration gradient of these hydrogen molecules. Here's my ATP synthase molecule as we see. Waiting on the bottom is going to be a molecule of oxygen, O2. Now, hydrogen is going to be attracted to the oxygen molecules. So this hydrogen molecule is going to spin down here. It's going to turn this energy or turn this enzyme around, okay? And it's going to bump ADP into P to make our ATP molecule. Remember we talked about that? ADP plus phosphate makes our ATP, right? Finally, the last molecule that's made is water. How is that made? Remember, like I said, when the hydrogen molecule goes down, it spins the energy, okay, to bump these two molecules together, and in return, hydrogen plus our oxygen is going to make water. It's going to make water. So, stage 3. Okay, what you guys need to know, it occurs in the inner membrane of the mitochondria. It occurs in the inner membrane here, located right here along the cristae. It is an aerobic process, meaning oxygen is required. The electrons are passed through proteins across the mitochondrial membrane, and a full total of 32 ATP molecules are made through the electron transport chain. So, once again, to go over the electron transport chain, as we said, NADH and FADH are going to come in and they're going to drop off the hydrogens. The hydrogens then are going to form this concentration gradient. Okay? Waiting along the matrix is going to be our molecule of oxygen. As we said, remember, oxygen is required. Now, oxygen then is going to have an affinity, because it's negative, for these positive hydrogen molecules. As we can see here, hydrogen will go down the ATP synthase. Okay, it will bump into oxygen to make water, H2O, and it gives the energy of ATP synthase to bump ADP plus P to make ATP. Now, here's something that's super important. When we talked about our cyanide poisoning, what happens if there's no oxygen? Because remember we said when a person is poisoned with cyanide, they can't carry oxygen. So I want you to think, I just crossed out oxygen. What can your body not make if there's no oxygen available? Well, I'm hoping you said ATP, right? If there's no oxygen, then that means that these hydrogen molecules here cannot go down the ATP synthase. If they can't go down here, then they're not going to bump ADP to P to make ATP. Okay? The day you stop making energy or ATP is the day you are dead. Okay? I hate to say it that way, but that is true facts. Okay? Bio facts, FYI. Okay? No ATP, no life. Life derives on energy. Okay? All right. This is the last video I would like for you guys to see. This sums up all three parts: glycolysis, Krebs cycle, and the electron transport chain. And I'm hoping you guys learned something good today.